Hello everyone and welcome back to the Okada Research channel for new adventures. Today talking about mainly Daniel Mcginnis, but we'll also chase around John Smith. And you should stay until the end of the video since there are some things I found which are kind of disturbing. But let's start. As usual, I'll use fair use on YouTube because I'm going to use material or parts of material that I don't own. And this is pretty much where we left our last video describing who owned what on the island. I stood corrected about the word homestead, and I thank the people who made the comment on the last video. Homestead doesn't mean that you live on it and your home is there. It's just that you own the land. So point taken. And we remember from our last video, several families owned and lived, at least 4 families lived on the island in 1795, according to the records. And one thing interested is John Smith was the one owning the lot where the money pit was. My problem and why I started doing research for this video was that according to the source you read, Daniel Mcginnis was either 36 or 16 years old when he discovered the money pit. The stream of information from the family Mcginnis, who published the book I showed in my last video, tend to claim that from their research, Daniel Mcginnis was 36 when he discovered the money pit. And the legend and the records of Lunenburg and the Reader Digest state that he was 16. And I didn't like this, and I wanted to go deeper. So I started chasing information on the net, and I found that book from Randall Sullivan, which is available. All the excerpts are coming from the Google pages featuring the book, and I put the address here at the bottom, or you can use keyword search. And it starts with John Smith, and it's all about the date of discovery. So according to Randall Sullivan, the first records where John Smith appears was owning the lot on which the money pit was. The record was September 28, 1790, where he married at 15 years old, but it was kind of the age at which you got married back in the days, to Sarah Floyd. And then he registered his presence when he bought lot 18 from a Chester merchant for £5. And it was the plot where the land was located. That percentage seems to have been the main basis for the claim that the money pit has been discovered late 1795. I didn't know that, but a lot of people think that why 1795? It's because it's the year at which John Smith bought his lot, which is interesting, not unreasonable, but far from conclusive, and I agree with him. But it's interesting, and there's some debates. He writes that, according to some literature, you can find 1799 as a date for the money pit, but everybody takes 1795 for granted without any other proof. And I think that's interesting. And I always wonder, how comes he buys the lot? According to the record, he buys his lot on the 26th of June. And if the money pit was found and started to be dug in 1795, we don't know the month or the date. But we know the season. It couldn't be winter. You can't dig anything on this island in winter. There's snow, it's cold, and there's no mention or record that the record was that it was easy to dig. So probably summer times, late spring, summer, early fall, and we're talking about 26th of June here, which corresponds exactly. So as the first records are from 1856, the Lunenburg report, about the date at which the money pit was discovered, maybe they took 26 June 1795 as a date, which corresponds to the date he bought this lot. I don't know, but it's just to me so weird that it all happened at the same time. He purchased the money pit lot right when they discovered the money pit. Couple of weeks before, couple of weeks after, but still, it's just strange. But maybe the date 1795 is wrong indeed, and it's another date. I mean, we don't know for that sure, except a couple of reports. So that was one point. The second point, Judge Desbrizet, who's the one who wrote the Lunenburg Report 1856, described Daniel Mcginnis, one of the earliest settlers on Oak Island. No proof of record before 1795, but what the author says here is that it doesn't mean much because the way the records of the poll tax were created, it was only for adult males. And 21 years old was the age required to pay for the poll tax. So if Mcginnis was a teenager, and you could be 15 years old, married, owning land, owning home, farmer, etc., and you wouldn't pay any poll tax since you're not 21, and you wouldn't appear on the record. So potentially, there was a Daniel Mcginnis teenager living on the island. The fact that it doesn't show up on the poll tax record doesn't mean anything. So it's still a possibility it was there. Let's carry on. The author brings our attention to a book named Families of the Western Shore, which seems to be a very precise genealogical book and reference. And he talks about a book on the Mcginnis, which is on the net. There's a Mcginnis forum on the people who've got the name and come from the Mcginnis clan. You can find it on the net. I managed to find it. And now I'm chasing the location in Scotland they were all coming from. Because one of the questions I've got is, did those four families living on the so-called Treasure Island, did they know each other from before the island era? That's what I'm chasing now. And look at this. The clan began late 18th century, ended up in the that's the book. That's the span of the book of the Mcginnis family book. So the first entry described the arrival in Nova Scotia of a Donald Mcginnis, a planter of Welsh descent who came to Chester from New England with, amongst other, the Vaughan brothers. Wow. So the Vaughan family was already connected to the Mcginnis family before they came to Nova Scotia. It's not your neighbor by chance. It's your neighbor by choice almost. People you know from North Carolina, which is where they were coming from. In around the year 1772. But the author carries on that it's probably 1784 instead of 1772 because Mcginnis was awarded a crown grant of 100 acres in 1784, which is probably the date they came here. Interesting, huh? The Vaughan and the Mcginnis families knew each other, at least those people. Okay, let's carry on. So Carly Morash, who runs the museum on Oak Island, gave the author a copy of a document that was prepared by the Mcginnis family, writing the book I was talking about earlier in one of my previous video. And that's what I was saying. They said it showed that Daniel Mcginnis has been 36 years old at the time of the money pit discovery. They relied on 3 documents: application for compensation for losses during the American Revolution War, submission to the Honorable Lord Commissioner of His Majesty Treasurer, dated 1784, and, check this out, the application for a memorial to Donald Mcginnis, captain of the North Carolina militia. And on the basis of those, the family has created a timeline for Donald Mcginnis. Yes, spellings from the clan can change. That follow, and that's very interesting. Birthday in Scotland. That person, that captain, was born in Scotland through his immigration to America in 1770. Residence with his parents in North Carolina. So the whole family moved. He was born in 1759, and his parents, mother, and brother, or brothers and sister, moved to America in 1770. So he was, how old? 11 years old when he moved to North Carolina. His residence in North Carolina. And in 1776, he enrolls in the ranks of loyalists, so fighting against independence when the revolution broke out, and that's who he served under. His eventual relocation to Nova Scotia in around 1785. The final event listed on the timeline was this man, the captain, attendance to the baptism of his grandson, John James Mcginnis. So here we are with a Daniel Mcginnis, born in 1759, who indeed would be 36 in 1995. And that person attends the baptism of his grandson Johann in 1795. So he has a son somewhere, or a daughter. That is not mentioned here. So there was a Daniel Mcginnis, captain of the North Carolina militia, born in Scotland, migrated with his parents when he was 11-year-old, landed in North Carolina, farmers, and he had a grandson in 1795 in the Chester area. Interesting, huh? Let's carry on. So what about the baptism of the grandson? So the author goes back to Family of Western Shore, and he discovers a reference to a document, the baptism of James John Mcginnis, son of Daniel and Maria Barbara. Here we are. The Daniel Mcginnis Jr., who married Barbara, Maria Barbara, who becomes Barbara Maria. Remember in my last video, they changed the name, the priest? He's the son of Daniel. So there's a Daniel Sr., a Daniel Jr. Daniel Jr. is 16 years old when he discovers the money pit, and his father is 36. Here we are. We have two Daniel Mcginnis. That solves the problem. And here what the author says, I was satisfied that a working model for who Daniel Mcginnis has been and where he had come from. Son of a Scottish or Welsh father, came to America as a boy, 11-year-old, lived with family in North Carolina, joined the Loyalist side on the Revolution War, migrated to Canada after the British surrender, accepting the grant of the acres near Chester, and not necessarily on Oak Island specified. And it makes sense that he was 20 years old when his son Daniel Jr. Was born. Right? So there was a Daniel Mcginnis Sr., fought the war, was granted land, and a Daniel Mcginnis Jr., who discovered the money pit when he was 16. His father was 36. Okay, I was satisfied there. I was happy because I found out how come you had two possible ages when Daniel Mcginnis discovered the money pit, because there's two Daniel Mcginnis, father and son. But that was not it. Let's have a look at the timeline of his life, of the captain. And by the way, he was not just a private enlisted Minuteman on the English side loyalist. He was a captain. That's quite it's not high, but it's not low. It's medium in the hierarchy of officer. Usually when you're a captain above a lieutenant in the hierarchy, you're pretty educated. That's how the military works nowadays. I don't know, back in the days, it was Independence War. Maybe the British were eager to find whoever they could to staff their local army, and they would grant easily higher rank. But between private and captain, there's quite a lot of ranks. Sergeant, corporal, you name it. So very interesting, unless captain means something else back in the days, and I'm not up to date with my military knowledge of British Army in the 1700s, but it was 1800. But that's interesting. He was a captain already. Born in Scotland, it's at 1759. Moved to America with his parents, migrant to North Carolina. The county that they landed in was Anson County, North Carolina. If any viewer is from Anson County, North Carolina, please do some research locally at the city hall or the church to see if you can find any trace of the Mcginnis family, whatever spelling. He enlisted in the 1776 for the Independence War, or against it actually, and he was captain of the 82nd Regiment of North Carolina. So local, North Carolina. and he went to fight. And at the end of the Independence War, so he fought for 7 years. I mean, a soldier at war doesn't last long. 7 years surviving the war is pretty good. And he settles in Nova Scotia in 1784 or 85, according to the records. So here, you have a gap from this point and the end of the Independence War all the way to 1785 or 84, about 1 to 2 years, where Daniel is born already, because Daniel is 16 in Daniel Jr. He's 16 years old, so he was born in 85 moins 6, 79, if I count right. Sounds good. 79. So his son, Daniel Jr., was born at the end of the Independence War. But again, here I got a couple of years missing about his life that we may never find. And finally, grandfather he is, because he was 1759, 1795. He was, I was counting the other day and I was laughing because 89, he was 36 years old and a grandfather. 36 years old and a grandfather to the first son of Daniel Mcginnis, Joan, which I can, so this was my, the last video, that was the genealogy I created. But now this is all wrong. There's a level missing. So we have Donald Mcginnis, who became Daniel Mcginnis Sr., and as a son, he had Daniel Jr., discoverer of the money pit, who married Barbara Mary, who became Mary Barbara, as we said last time. And the first son is spelled John in the reference I found, but it's John most definitely. And Daniel had a son named George, who had a son named Ambrose, and here's the family of the writer of the family book that is modern, right? So here they are. There's two Daniel Mcginnis, and the whole literature and church records and etc. corroborates. Point done. I'm not over. During my searches, I fell into this awesome book. Well, I don't think it's awesome if you want to read it before going to bed, because this is in 3 books, Scottish Soldiers in Colonial America. It's just a reference of Scottish soldiers in the colonial war, one by one, each of them with a little paragraph. And for instance, there were James Abercrombie, born blah, 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 and what he did, Major General, etc., etc. And browsing through it, I was very surprised to find very interesting things. I found a Miles Mcginnis. Again, spelling different again. We had Mcginnis, Mcginnis, we had all of them. But look at the rest. Miles is his name, first name. Immigrated to America 1774, compatible with the family. Planter in Anson County. Loyalist and lieutenant on the North Carolina militia in 1780. Moved to Muscatbois, Halifax County, Nova Scotia in 1784. So we have a member of the Mcginnis family who was part of the regiment, lieutenant, and at the end of the war was granted land probably, and moved to Halifax County, Nova Scotia, Muscatbois. And look at this one, Mcginnis Donald, our Donald Mcginnis. Settled in Anson County. I bet it's his brother. Miles should be younger, I guess, from the rank. This one was a lieutenant. This one was the captain of the 82nd Regiment. North Carolina, Anson County, Loyalist. That's our Donald Mcginnis. And now hang on to the edge of your seat, because when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh. Where did Mcginnis Donald end up? His brother ended up in Muscatbois, Halifax County. Where did Donald Mcginnis end up after the war, according to the military records or whatever records are? Hang on to the edge of your seats, I said. He ended up in New Providence, Bahamas in 1784. If the records are right and the dates are right, after the war, Daniel Mcginnis, father of our Donald Mcginnis, went for 1 year or 1 year and a half, something like that, with the son and probably his wife, I guess, to New Providence, Bahamas, if this record is correct. I tried to check the internet what this meant and I couldn't find any record. Pro A0, that must be the reference of a record somewhere. And geez, I'd love to read it. Because Donald Mcginnis could have gone to Paris, I wouldn't care less. The problem is this place, New Providence, the Bahamas. If it doesn't ring any bell to you, this is the Republic of Pirate capital. This is a place that was a stronghold between 1706 and 1718. So we're talking about 60, 65 years before Daniel was on Oak Island or was released from the army. And it was the Republic of Pirates when our friend Henry Avery with the ship the Fancy. Remember my video that the Fancy, she's fast, she's made of wax, and he tells that poem about the Fancy being buried under the land? Avery founded the Bahamas Republic of Pirates. He bribed the governor of the Bahamas with gold, silver, and the era of piracy began in the Bahamas when the privateer brought his ship loaded after plundering the Indian Empire trade ship. And Nassau was then the base of pirate. They could operate safely, etc. And look at the name we find there: Jennings, Honeygold, Edward Touch, Blackbird, Bellamy, Stede Bonnet, Charles Vane, Rackham, Anne Bonny, Mary Red, all of them are here, except Captain Kidd, which doesn't seem to have spent much time on this because he was operating before, from what I remember reading. But still, our friend Avery is around. So what's the probability? They are insanely small, but come on. Donald Mcginnis went to New Providence, the Bahamas, spent some time there, and a year later, 6 months later, he's got acres and land in Chester, which is much more comfortable to live inland, and he ends up on the island with his friend Vaughan, that he came to Chester, according to a record, with from North Carolina, obviously. So, I don't know, because this is way crazy to think that Daniel Mcginnis' father made a trip to New Providence 60 years after the Republic of the Pirates. What did he know that attracted him there? What did he find there that made him go back to Nova Scotia and set on Oak Island with the Vaughan that he knew from before? I don't know. This is just far stretched, but look at those hints. I mean, if this is Donald Mcginnis, the one we think it is, and I tend to believe it is, I'm going to show you a letter later from a member of the family, which tends to corroborate exactly this. And if this record from David Thompson, I need to look at who it is right, what the heck did he go to the heart of the Republic of the Pirates 60 years ago in the Bahamas for? Jeez. Last thing. I found this letter on the net also in a genealogy forum, you see I'm doing homework, by somebody named Kel Hancock. And Mr. Hancock is a descendant of the Mcginnis family, from another branch of the three sisters that wrote the book, obviously. And look at what he says. I'm in the process of tracking the loyalist movement of Mcginnis prior to settling in Nova Scotia, and I found a connection to a Lieutenant Miles Mcginnis that's our Miles Mcginnis we discovered earlier in the record, who served under a Captain Donald Mcginnis. That's our captain. And he believes this captain is Donald Mcginnis, his grandfather. And he traces Miles. Trace can be traced back to the island of Skye, which is going to be my next step of research in video is they're all Scottish, a lot of Scottish, and they come from those islands. And the Scottish are known to work in clans, so very, very close people. So what's the probability those people on Oak Island were originating from the same part of the country in Scotland and the original one? Well, I think that was interesting. I hope you do too. Thanks for watching, and we'll have more videos soon, but don't hesitate to comment because I think this one is a very, very interesting finding. Thank you very much.